the county and county groups got together to update the return environment report that was done in 2010, and we had a project consultant helping us out with this. And really, the point here is you'll get pushback at times. Well, open space is just a pretty place or whatever, and it is more than that. And the intent of the study is to show some of the economic benefits of preserved open space. What are we looking at? We're looking at parks, conservancy-owned land, preserved farmland, homeowner association land, and there's another category, things like state game lands. East Vincent Township has a healthy amount of open space, and I know the number is a little bit debated at the moment, but you can see the properties that are permanently preserved that fall into these different categories, and perhaps there's some others that we'll be able to add to this map. So I think a little bit of history about open space in the counties warranted, and to expand on what was said before. Our protected land in the county is now, with the number we just figured out for 2020, we're up to 144,000 acres. That brings us to, I believe, 29.8% of the county. And just to put that in context, you can see the whole area of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia is 128,000 acres. So we're really been working hard at this. Some people will say, okay, we've done enough. That is not the view of the county. Landscapes 3 shows a lot of areas, rural areas and natural areas that should still be preserved. And what was the impetus for this was the amount of growth that was occurring and there was farm per week being developed. So the referendum was held in the late 80s in Chester County. And I believe it was 82% support for that funding to preserve land. And the county has kept that up. And the funding that has happened has been, even though the county's put a lot of money in, there's a lot of other money or donations that have occurred to preserve open space. And this is an example of how a new preserved property, how it might divvy up. The county's going to throw some money in. Local municipalities typically do. There's some good state programs that apply to, and sometimes there are landowner donations. In addition to the actual money going to open space program, the county has focused on revitalization of urban centers. So growth goes into these urban centers first, and to help the municipalities do their planning through our Vision Partnership Program. These numbers are a couple of years old now, but they show how much money has been invested. And if you look at Phoenixville, has experienced a lot of growth. That is growth in the past that might have sprawled out into our open space and farmland. In the Landscapes Tree, which is the county comprehensive plan process, there was strong support for open space and environmental protection. It by far leads the way in what residents were interested in our survey. And so communities are aware of this. And if you look at our county, we have over 30 municipalities, including East Vincent, that have enacted some kind of program to preserve open space, to fund the preservation of open space. And you can see it's really spread around the county. Just want to point out the importance of ag to Chester County. The Ag Preservation Program, Christine mentioned it earlier, is a key way of preserving the land. We've got to preserve the industry too. We have Agricultural Development Council in the Planning Commission for staff that helps work on that. We're actually currently working, just beginning with a consultant work on an agricultural economic development plan for Chester County. And that may have some relevance for you guys as you look at preserving more agricultural land. So in Land Use 3, the comp plan, we have a preserve goal 1 of 6, which is really focused on preservation of our open space and preserving our character in Chester County. As we have inevitable growth, how do we deal with it? We need to have it directed to the right places and preserve our other areas. And then there are a number of objectives for this open space and preservation goal. But I want to focus mostly on our the study and the return environment study. Brought in an expert out of Philadelphia, eConsult Solutions, to help generate the numbers that I'm going to go through. And they looked at a variety of areas that are benefits. And then what do they mean for individuals, whether it is dollars in their pocket, municipality, helping with tax revenues, or avoiding some costs that we would have otherwise. And I'll explain that a little bit as I go through this. And I'm beginning with a video here that just gives you a flavor of things. Can everyone hear the video?
No.
No.
No. All right, you can see it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
It's on the Chester County Planning website too. So.
It's on the website, so I encourage you to check it out. If you can't hear it, you probably need to hear it, but it is kind of a summary video of some of these things I'm going to go through. And it's just about, I don't know, 2.5 minutes long or something like that. So. All right, so those 5 areas, one is property values. Does open space improve property values? And the answer is yes. It is one factor that goes into why a property costs what it does. It's not the main factor, but it is an important factor. And just as school district is a factor, not directly associated with the property per se, but it is something that affects it. So eConsult looked at this, and they looked at open space properties, residential properties that were within half a mile of preserved open space. And they found that we've got a lot of open space in Chester County, so a lot of our homes are within half a mile, but estimated that it added about, on average, $11,000 in extra value. Add that up with all our homes, that's $1.65 billion in extra value. And that is extra tax revenue for the municipalities, the school districts, and the county. And one specific example, looking at Cheslin Preserve and the residential properties around it, that's in the central part of the county. And there's a significant increase in property values. There aren't a lot of homes around it, but it was an increase of 11% or 42,000 in that part of the county. Then if we turn to the environmental impacts, this probably needs a little more explanation, but essentially what they looked at was annual savings in about nearly $100 million, plus the value of carbon that is stored in our trees and our plants that are in our open space. And breaking down this 97 million of annual cost savings, what does this mean? So water quality supply provision. If we didn't have the open space that we have preserved, our water would be more polluted. There would be a cost to cleaning that water. In addition, we might need to import water, and there would be a cost to that. So they estimated those costs. Same thing with floods. Our open space helps absorb stormwater and reduce flooding. If we didn't have that, we would have more floods. There would be impacts of either having to build new flood mitigation measures, or there would be a need to repair buildings that were flooded. Wildlife habitat, this is really where they're estimating that there's a certain value to wildlife habitat that people are willing to pay. And if we didn't have that, then people would pay out that much per year. Air pollution removal is really related to what our open space and our trees and so on do. We're removing air pollution, the impacts of having to, if you wanted the same quality of clean air, then you would have to invest as much basically to help clean the air. And carbon sequestration, I'm stumbling over that, but that is essentially the annual, what's happening with new growth. The storage, the 120 million, is related to what's already stored in our existing trees and plants. And then an example of where this kind of comes into play would be in a property in Willstown Township that is owned by the trust there. They store carbon, they have environmental benefits, they have many other benefits that property provides, but the consultant looked at that specific example. And in this case, also our homeowners association lands provide these opportunities. I would add, you can see the before and after pictures here, how it is important for to work with our homeowners associations to help them maintain their lands and improve their lands. And we have quite a bit of it, 12% of our open space. It also has recreational and health benefits. Fairly straightforwardly is we have a lot of parks where people go and recreate. There's a certain value to that. If people had to pay for doing that, there's a certain willingness to pay that consultants use based on studies to estimate how much we're saving our households.
I'm upstairs.
I don't think I want to pay for garbage out right now for this one.
Hi, should I continue?
I just muted him.
Okay, thank you. Our next one is health savings, and this is related to costs that are saved by people getting out and exercises. So there may be, there'll be medical cost savings. There's actually workers' comp savings. And there is, by people being healthier, there's less lost productivity. And an example of a park that really provides a lot of these benefits is Anson B. Nixon Park in the Kennett area, a great park that really is well used and provides a lot of recreational benefits to folks in that area. Our next area is economic activity, direct economic activity from preserved open space. I think the most obvious one is on preserved ag. There are jobs, there are salaries paid, there are spin-off effects from that can really have economic benefit. And for those who aren't aware, that Chester County has the second largest revenue for agriculture in the state after Lancaster County. There's also tourism that comes in. So people come to the county to hike or to participate in various ways on our open space. And that creates jobs and wages and other spin-off effects. And there is a cost, but it is also seen as a benefit. Is we have to maintain these properties. That creates jobs, wages are paid, taxes are paid on those wages, and that is an economic activity that occurs. And a couple of examples here is looking at all the preserved farmland in West Fallowfield Township. There's a lot of preserved land there, and they're farms. Those are some of the, along with Lancaster County, that part of Chester County are some of the best non-irrigated, most productive non-irrigated soils in the world. And so it's creating jobs, it's creating earnings. There's also things like people coming to our parks. A great example of that is Sandy Hall Heritage Park, where in the reenactment of the Battle of Brandywine brought in a lot of visitors, generated a ton of economic activity when that occurred. And I think that's, it's harder to define, but again and again, you hear corporate leaders and people who work in the county saying why do they like being in Chester County, and a lot of it's based on our quality of place, and that is based on our open space in many ways, as well as our historic character that we have. And the last category I'm going to talk about is community cost savings. These are analyses that Brandywine Conservancy has done for various municipalities. And kind of on average, what they found was that new residential development costs a community about $1.11 for every dollar that is received in taxes. So it's costing more than it brings in. And why is this happening? It's pretty much school children. It's school children that is driving that disparity. Whereas farmland and open space costs an average 7 cents in new costs. Commercial or industrial development is going to be similar, 6 cents, 5 cents, right in that ballpark. So that's a quick run through and a lot of different things. And I wanted to more in question and answers be able to get into any details that people wanted to do. But just to summarize, encourage people to check out the report, which is on the Planning Commission's website, as well as the video whose sound you couldn't hear. I encourage you, as you are currently doing, to continue participating in your planning efforts and supporting what the municipality is doing to preserve open space and to get them to continue to do that. And the initiative that you have is in East Vincent with the tax and the funds that you were supported. It'd be great to start using that money on some of the unpreserved properties. And what we're just showing on this map is in green our properties that we're showing as over 10 acres outside of your growth area that is not yet preserved. So you still got lots of opportunities. Sometimes you hear people there aren't any more opportunities, but there are. We got to get out there and enjoy them. I want to give a quick pitch for our Open Space Summit. We're holding it on April 29th. We're continuing our efforts at the Planning Commission to re-energize the community on preserving open space and showing municipalities tools and things they can do to preserve open space. So I hope you'll be able to attend, and I encourage you to encourage your other officials from the municipality to attend, whether they're elected or volunteer like you guys. So that is a fairly quick overview of what we have here in the report. And I think I'd like to open it up at this stage for questions, and I'm sure folks do have some questions.
I had a question.
Sure.
I'm aware that some of the communities in Chester County have taken this cost of community services into their planning process, really solidify what identity they want to have going into the future. Could you talk to us about any townships that use this cost of community services to enhance the rural character of their township?
Yeah, I think they're primarily using it as a tool to demonstrate to typically to the elected officials, we should be preserving land. And so we've got a lot of communities, and they tend to be in the western and southern parts of the county that have done these community costs of services studies with the Brandywine Conservancy. Looking through the list right now. And yeah, they're pretty much mostly in the west and the south. So East Nottingham, Elk, Highland, Honeybrook, Kennet, London Britain, London Grove, Londonderry, Lower Oxford, West Battlefield, West Sadsbury are all communities that have done that. So what are communities doing? I think there's probably 5 tools I would highlight that we see. One is getting money to put in, whether through a tax or a bond issue, and East Vincent's doing that. A second tool is participating in the farmland preservation program. You have to have an agricultural security area. East Vincent has that, which is good. And then that would qualify farmers to apply for preservation to the county state program. Then another tool is cluster development, where you're preserving 50-60% plus of open space. You guys have that. I don't know how pervasive it is in the township. transfer of development rights, where you move development from one part of the community to another. And that involves a developer, has to be involved in that. And there's often, in order for that to work, you may end up with more homes than you would otherwise in the community as a whole. And then the last one, which I don't think you're doing, is true agricultural zoning. And we see that primarily. I think we have 11 municipalities in the county that do it, central western part of the county. That would be zoning where you are allowed, the way it typically works, you'll have one home per 25 acres perhaps. It's often a sliding scale. And you can put it on a smaller lot, but the density is really very low. That is politically very difficult to do. I come from Montgomery County, where I tried to convince some municipalities to do what we call true agricultural zoning, because farmers view that development potentials of their properties as their retirement income potentially. It becomes challenging politically to get that through. And usually it's places that have super strong ag soils and where there's just not much development pressure they've been able to do it. And it's great that we have 11 municipalities in Chester County have done that ag zoning. So those are kind of the tools we see communities doing, and they often do it through their planning processes.
Well, it's good to hear. I mean, I think we do have a number of those tools already in place.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I guess it becomes the will to do.
Yep, it does. And that, that cycles around. Municipal officials change, and it's a different group around the county of elected officials at the municipal level. If you look at who was around 20 years ago when a lot of this stuff happened, and there was a lot of advocacy for that, and who's elected now, they're just not familiar with a lot of these things, I think.
Good to have a historian. Anybody else have a question they'd like to ask Brian?
I see a question in the chat. I don't know if you see that.
Oh, okay. Let me go to that.
I guess it's Todd.
Yes, and I was muted. I started. Really, I'll summarize it. How's that?
Good.
In your slideshow, you showed how there was added value to the properties in the county, but that also seems to, by making the property itself more valuable, seems like it makes it more valuable for developers and their time to try to get exceptions or somehow get their project through. So what are the tools the townships have? Zoning is it, right? As far as the way to sustain limitations?
Zoning is the main tool. There are other tools, but I think you're correct in that as a community makes itself more desirable by preserving open space or other things, revitalizing its downtown, investing in trails, whatever it might be. And we've done a lot of that in Chester County, and we've made Chester County a more desirable place, which means more people want to be here and more developers want to be here. It's a little bit of a catch-22, but you do want to do that with your community. So yes, zoning is your main tool you have. Spending money is another one. I would also say that limiting your sewer and water provision to your growth area is an important tool that you have to keep in mind. You don't want to be extending these out into areas that are then going to encourage more properties. Where you want to see preservation, don't stick a sewer line out there, because that's going to encourage more development. So I think that's another tool that municipalities have. And you pull these all together in your planning documents, your comprehensive plan. Subdivision ordinance is another one, but I think it's less critical for this conversation about kind of open space preservation.
Thanks.
I wanted to do a follow-up to that, if you didn't mind. What
Sure.
about density levels in zoning? I mean, that is the crux of the matter. And how can Chester County Planning Commission be supportive of helping townships maintain the right density balance so that the rural character can be sustained.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of a legal question too, in reality. So what are the legal limitations that municipalities have to take into account? One is on density is pretty much the courts have ruled anything requiring acreage above 2-acre lots is illegal. You're going to lose in court. So developer's going to beat you unless you have true ag zoning. The courts have supported that. So you can't zone for 5-acre lots. You can do it, but then when you get challenged, so far you're going to lose because everyone has lost who's tried to do that. So there are some legal limitations. The other legal limitation is that every municipality has to provide for its fair share, if it's in the path of growth, which East Vincent is, has to provide for its fair share of all housing types. Mobile home parks, apartments, townhouses, singles. So how do you define that? That's very vaguely defined. So you have to have an area where you're allowing that, or alternatively, work with your neighbors on a regional plan and combine with your neighbors and say, okay, Phoenixville, you're going to take our fair share of growth. And that does happen, and there are groupings that come together to do that. Not as common in Chester County as in some other counties. So within those parameters, then there's no magic answer to what is the appropriate density. It's really what does the community want as you go through the planning process and what do you feel is appropriate. So I don't know if there's a clear-cut answer to that question within that framework that I just explained. But I would say that in your rural and your preservation areas, keep it as low as possible. So.
Anybody else have a question? Andre?
So one of the things that I had seen in Lancaster County that they seem to have been pretty successful with are leased agricultural areas where they have, agricultural zones, and then they lease it sort of like, shared crops. And you can see, you see how they have all of those signs that indicate who owns which areas of the crops, and they lease it out to consortiums, to companies, whatever. Is there an appetite for that sort of agricultural development in Chester County?
I'm not sure exactly what it is. Are you talking about like when a farmer agrees to all my product is going to go to Land O'Lakes or something like that? Or
Yeah, I mean, the way that I understand it works, and I'd have to double check because I'm not sure if it's a like township or county owned land necessarily, but I do know that they lease, like they have an agricultural zone and then they lease it to farmers or co-ops or, whoever's willing to lease the land to keep it farmed.
Oh yeah, okay. I see what you're saying.
That sort of thing. And I'm wondering,
right.
Coventry and West Vincent do that.
Oh,
yeah, so absolutely. So Chester County does it. We lease land out to some of our big properties. We lease land out to farmers. You'll see conservancies will do that also. One of the debates going on in the ag community is this competition that is going on for land. And one of the concerns farmers have with the leased land issue is that sometimes the government or the conservancy will put on restrictions to make it a little harder for the farmer to farm in a way that they need to do to keep up with market trends and things like that. And there's some interesting conversations going on around that. We have some farmers in Chester County, it might be hard to believe, who farm 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 acres. And those farmers lease a lot of that. They don't own all of that. Now, they're usually leasing from private landowners, and those farmers who are doing that are typically very, very sophisticated crop farmers. And all their equipment are hundreds of thousands of dollars types of equipment that they're using, completely computerized. I mean, everything's computerized on those, but the farmer actually doesn't drive it. It drives itself on these properties. It measures exactly how much seed is being spread. So some very interesting things happening on leased farms. So yeah, so I think the future of ag is a very intriguing question for us here in Chester County, and we're very strong in a lot of areas, not just mushrooms and equine, but also in grain and produce and other areas. We're a little weaker in the animal product side of agriculture. Lancaster County is much stronger on that side.
Yeah, see, I think the push for ag zoning is made a lot easier when you remind people that jobs come with. I think people always forget that farming brings jobs, food brings jobs. So
absolutely. And when you have value added, like we're having at like the Seven Stars Farm, that's in East Vincent, right? Is that an East Vincent farm?
Yes.
A lot of value added there that brings even more jobs and more spin-offs of various types. So, and that certainly is a trend given labor, land, and energy costs in this area compared to maybe central PA. A lot of farmers have to do value added to really make ends meet, unless it's a hobby farm or you have another job too. And a lot of farmers have more than one job.
thank you.
Yeah. I could go on and on about that side, but I won't.
Yeah, you brought up the point, Brian, about, farmers may find themselves in a position where they may need to sell to a developer, as part to ensure that they have something for retirement. That's something that seems like it's a true and real obstacle. So, how do we approach farmers? What's the successful model for approaching farmers, and at what point in that life cycle so that they're set up for success? How can we as a community or as a county try to prevent farmers from landing in that unfortunate situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, certainly the Ag Land Preservation Program will bring an injection of funds that helps answer that. Another thing is that the value of preserved ag land is going up dramatically. And there's competition for that. So that can be an answer somewhat to farmers who say, hey, I need this for my retirement, would be, why don't you go into farmland preservation? And I think our Department of Parks and Preservation, I assume they can provide you some data on sales of preserved farm showing that this value is going up. So if you need to sell, you can still get your retirement income out, and you're selling to what now has to be another farmer because it's been preserved. I'm not positive we have that in Chester County. I know in Montgomery County, my crew, we ran the land preservation program, and so we had that data available, and we were absolutely able to make that case. I think the other thing is, as a community, we need to make it easier for farmers to farm and to be adaptable. And that means sometimes accepting some farm practices that we may not love. Farmer may need to do some agritainment, it's called. They may need to bring on visitors. It's going to add more in order to really remain viable as a farm. So I think that's one element also that municipalities can help farmers be able to adapt to market trends, that they just need to do this to be able to make a living.
Have you done any summits with farmers? Is there a summit such as that?
Um, well, there's a lot of outreach in various ways. So our Agricultural Development Council absolutely does a lot of work with farmers. Pulling them all together is challenging, but what you tend to try to do is events like that might be a training or educational. You do it in January, typically, maybe February, and you bring in partners like Farm Bureau or other partners. So I think more things like that are good to do. I know in Montgomery County, we did every 4 years, we did what we essentially called a summit. We did it in January. We always provided a nice lunch to make sure we got people out there to come out and join us. And we always had, 100, 150 farmers come out. So,
Yeah, because some of it seems like it's an education thing too. So a summit would help. I grew up in Montgomery County, so I think of the Dixon Farm. Wasn't that the big one, the big farm in Montgomery County?
It's certainly a big farm in Montgomery County. Yeah, absolutely. And let's see, I guess it's in White Marsh rather than Springfield town.
Yep, that's where I grew up, exactly. Yep.
There's also an effort by the Chester County Economic Development Council that came out of work in the early 2000s. It was called the Countryside Exchange. And as a result of that Chester County exchange program, where people were brought in from all around the world to consult in 4 areas of the county, the leadership convinced the Economic Development Council to start a whole new ag outreach and grant program and assistance program. And that all came out of the Countryside Exchange. And
that was great. They're not doing it anymore. And I think, one reason we're doing this ag economic development study is really to say, okay, what do we need to do now to help? What do we need to do next, basically?
When did the program cease?
I think about 4 or 5 years ago, they ran out of, maybe 3 years ago, they ran out of funding to help pay for the position that they had. It's unfortunate. So.
That's important, because then that's really a great outreach method to garner grants and new ideas for the different farms.
Yeah, they still help out with farmers with loans and things like that. So they still have that element, but they don't have quite the same level that they did.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe you'll come up with some new ideas then, Brian.
I hope so. I mean, we got this great consultant coming out of Maryland, and we have a very good steering committee. And Gary Smith from the Economic Development Council is on the steering committee. Sure. And they're in the process of kind of doing some data analysis of our ag community. They're out there setting up interviews with farmers. Another big issue is the next generation of farmers and how we, going to bring them along so that, as we preserve farms, we need them to be farmed, and we need people to do that. So it's a big issue right now.
And I think we do have an example next door in South Coventry with Lundale Farm, where you take a property and you provide opportunities for young new farmers to come on and have a piece of land to begin their business. That Lundale Farm model is something that we could expand as well.
It's a very interesting model, and they will be touring Lundale Farm, and Jody Gauker, who heads it up now, is also on the steering committee. And I think it's a very interesting model, and it's got some potential. I think there's not going to be one answer. And I think this is one thing that consultants have emphasized is there's going to be lots of different things we're going to need to do to keep ag strong in the county. And when we want to keep it ag strong, also from a land preservation standpoint, even if the farmer doesn't sell, we want them to be strong and economically viable. If they're not selling, I mean, for development, for preservation, we still want them to be a strong, viable farm so they don't sell to the developer. So they have a viable business that they can keep operating.
Yeah. That's a great point. We're getting close to 8 o'clock. I know we started a little bit late. Do we have any additional questions? I think, Brian, if you're okay, we could take another question or two if anyone has anything.
Yeah, I'm fine going a little late. My other one's supposed to be a half an hour meeting and it was a 65-minute meeting. So,
Okay,
Time, and then you won't be too late.
right.
it's a hot topic.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Comments?
I'm really glad you came on and talked with us because you gave us a lot of good ideas. And we'll be recording, we've recorded your presentation, which we'll put on our Facebook page and
Right.
our regular website page, and we'll spread the good word.
Yeah, I think it's great to see you guys all interested in advocating for this. I think that it is important to continue to keep the profile high, that we need to be preserving our character and our open space while growth is occurring. We're going to see continuing growth. It's not going to go away. And so we got to manage it. And part of that management is, boy, we got to preserve while we can. So.
Yeah, that's exactly what the advocacy group here in East Vincent Township, that's our platform. So, we're singing the same song for sure. And this agricultural economic development study sounds really interesting. So we'll want to keep an eye on that. And, we've got high numbers in membership. I think we're close to 900. So we'll certainly also share the word about the Open Space Summit that's coming in April. So we'll do that as well.
Right.
Thanks so much for everyone that attended tonight. Thank you, Brian. Great to meet you.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully we can bring more of these types of informational, educational sessions to our membership. And it's great to see everyone's faces tonight.
Yeah.
So thanks again to Brian. Thanks, Chris, for facilitating.
No problem. I just have a little sidebar.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Curious, is Sean Mannix? It is. Well, go Post Sox, but I know they're going to be in Worcester now, Sean. Haven't seen you in a long time. Good to see you. I thought it was you.
Great to see you, Christine. And yeah, if we have a bunch of Red Sox fans in the room, we could take this for another hour or two.
We could.
Drop the name. No Yankees fans allowed.
Oh.
I just had to check that out. Sorry. We go back
No.
with each other on lots of things.
I'll track you down. We can continue this conversation.
All right.
It's great to see you.
Good to see you, Sean. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for coming tonight, and especially Brian. We really appreciate your wisdom and insights, and these tools that you've presented tonight, I think, will be extremely helpful for us and for others throughout the region.
Thanks for inviting me. And my email's on that PowerPoint if you recorded it. And I encourage you, BOLARHSCO.org. It's very simple. And I encourage you to contact me with any questions.
Great. Thanks again.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.